Well, hello. My good afternoon for those that are watching. My name is Leroy Hibbert, and just to give you some background as far as who I am as a person, I actually I have a beautiful wife that I love very much, and her name is Helen. And I've got a beautiful daughter as well named Deja Moore. And my wonderful daughter is actually just got married last year. I just do have to share that. She got married on the same day Prince Harry and Meghan Markle got married. And then we found out this year that she's having a baby boy. So we were just ecstatic. My wife and I were just beside ourselves. I just had to tell you at the forefront before I get into specifically what we're going to talk about. Because my family is very important to me and I love them dearly. My beautiful wife, Helen, and also my daughter, Deja Moore. But what I want to do today is let you know that I actually am employed at LUSO Community Services, and I'm the Multicultural Outreach Coordinator. And the premise of LUSO itself, the organization, we have a mission statement, which means it's a three-pronged approach, and it's inclusiveness, well-being, and the prosperity of the city. And so all of our programs are geared towards one of those three areas that we focus on. The organization itself has been around for over 30 years. We work with newcomers to Canada. We have youth programs, literacy programs, and my program is not necessarily geographically based. So I do a lot of work in what's called London. I also go out to the county schools in St. Thomas and Park Hill, and go down to Alcy Craig on occasion. And so what I basically do is workshops and presentations on the area of race, culture, ethnicity, cultural humility, Black history. And what we're going to discuss today is building healthy relationships from a cultural and racial perspective. Just momentarily here, I'm just going to put my glasses on because I see something. All right, all right. We have somebody that joined in the conversation here. Fantastic. All right, so just to let you know that I'm excited to be here. This is a wonderful platform to have this conversation, to talk about this particular issue. But building healthy relationships from a cultural and racial perspective. And what does that sort of mean? Do you know the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members? And that's by a phenomenal woman named Coretta Scott King, who was married to Dr. Martin Luther King. Well, I think before we can discuss actually specifically on how to build some of these relationships, I think what we need to do is talk about the area of culture and also race independently. But what I'll do is I'll conflate the two and talk about them together, but also separate them for the sake of discussion here. But in my travels, in my journey, and going to different schools and seeing different people of different ethnicities, different walks of life, races, cultures, I've come to find out that people have a number of different ideas and views as far as what culture is and how that impacts how we interact with one another from a personal and interpersonal particular way. Well, I kind of look at culture as this. I call it the VIB of culture, which I share sometimes with students and also adults as well, based on the environment I'm in. And I look at culture as VIB, which stands for values, ideas, and beliefs. So it's a VIB, which means it's an acronym, which means each letter stands for a certain word: values, ideas, and beliefs. And that's what I think culture is. Now, I look around the city here and I see what's going on with people that have different values, ideas, and beliefs and how it's affecting how we interact with one another. You know what happened not too long ago down in what's called New Zealand, where a gentleman walked into a mosque and murdered many, many lives just because of what these folks believe. I go down to what's called a school and I hear people and I hear staff and people share with me information about what is going on in their environment as far as what people believe. I heard a situation just not too long ago at a store in the Westmount area where a young woman that was of what's called Muslim background wearing a hijab, which is a head covering based on what they believe. And she was just doing some shopping, and apparently there's a woman that walked in and said something that was not appropriate to her in a grocery store, and just really made her feel very uncomfortable. And it affected her, and I think it affected the community as well. And it goes for all different walks, all different religions, and all different ways. But culture, values, ideas, and beliefs. I think what's affecting our lives right now, and our lives relationally, is basically what we believe. Because, some of our beliefs come up from a number of different places. See, a belief may come from a family member. A belief can come from a TV show. A belief can come from a movie that somebody watches. A belief can come from what's called a game that they go and get themselves involved in. And we're getting mixed messages and a lot of different ideas throughout the course of our life. From the time we came onto the planet, until we exit the planet Earth. We're getting a lot of information. And we actually have to kind of navigate through our lives as far as what are we going to take and assume in our own lives and help improve the relationships of others that we come in contact with. So values, ideas, and beliefs. And that's what culture is, I think, under my understanding. Many times I go to schools and different arenas, and when I talk about culture, people have this idea of country. That is not excluded but from the conversation. It is included, but it's bigger beyond that. It's bigger than basically the country that you're from, because each country, we talk about culture, there are cultures within cultures. So it's almost like subcultures. So you have a culture, for example, you may be from Jamaica or Pakistan or Indonesia, and within the confines of your community, or China or Canada, not to exclude everybody or anyone, but in the confines of that, you have cultures within that. So we're we're intersectional people. We have different identities that we have to navigate through each and every day of our lives. And based on the environment that we're in, some of those identities may be looked at as problematic for some people. But culture, values, ideas, and beliefs. You know, people ask me on occasion sometimes, you know, why I repeat things on occasion, or maybe more than once. You know, I heard that 7 is the number of perfection. And I think some of these people have to hear things almost repeatedly for it to become real to them. I've heard that number 7 is the number of perfection, because I guess that's why there's 7 days in a week. So moving on now, I actually, in interacting with people that are from, for example, the Caucasian persuasion, you know, sometimes not to just isolate that particular group, but sometimes they feel they don't have culture. So they got to go to an event to get it. You don't have to go to an event to get culture. You're going to bring your culture to that event, whether it's Sunfest or another cultural festival in the city. But I think sometimes people have this ethnocentric attitude where we look at our culture as a measuring stick on how other people should interact with each other. So culture is very critical and it's very important. Oh, let me get my glasses on again. I think I see somebody here. Uh-oh. All right, another person joined in. All right, fantastic. Excellent. You know, it's a great opportunity, and I want to let you know that culture is very important to me. I was actually raised in London, Ontario, and I was born in Toronto. My birth name was Leroy, but when I was younger, actually my birth name was Corey, excuse me, but when I was younger, my mother and father changed my name to Leroy to reflect my dad. My dad passed away roughly 9 years ago, going to be this April. I have 4 sisters. I'm the only boy in the family. So my parents are from Jamaica. So as my parents are from Jamaica, when they came to this country, they wanted a new life. Came to Toronto, then they moved here. My dad is a welder by profession. My mom had a number of different professions, and she's a wonderful parent. And they brought us and they taught us about our culture as far as people and what Jamaica was all about, from the food to the people, to the country, to the land. But then they also taught us about the Canadian context as well, about being here in Canada in different ways, by introducing us to people that did not look like us, by sending us to schools that with people that did not necessarily look like us, although people did look like us in the school that I was at. And I had a very interesting time, very dynamic time in the elementary school that I went to, and high school here as well. And I'll get into some of those specifics momentarily. Well, just to let you know, give some quick background. LUSO, we do have a website. It's actually, just to backtrack very quickly, because I just want to share this with you. It's www.lusocentre.org. So lusocenter.org, that is our website. Our website is being rebuilt, so if you go on the website and things are somewhat a little bit different, just have mercy on us and forgive us. We're getting there. And then in addition to that, my email address here personally is leroy@lusocenter.org. So it's Leroy, Leroy, @lusocenter.org. And after this is done, you can actually, if you want to, just email me personally as well. And regarding the topic here, if you have questions, you can do it here on Facebook as well, which is fantastic. And then we also have a Twitter account. And we do have a Twitter handle, which is @LUSO_ and the word London. So it's @LUSO_ and the word London. You know, in life, I believe there's actually 4 kinds of people in life today. Those who watch things happen, those who let things happen, those who make things happen, and those who asked what happened. And I think in life, regarding culture and people from different walks of life, I think the only reason we should look down on somebody is to actually help them up. See, you can never change what you do not acknowledge. So we're going to get into some of these aspects here to really build some community and understand. Also, in addition to the conversation, I like to actually share this with you as well. I actually, along with about 3 other women, we're actually doing some work at Museum London. And Museum London is actually putting on a very phenomenal display, and it's called Difficult Terrain. Difficult Terrain. And this exhibition starts April 6th, and it's going to go until September 15th of 2019. And what's going to happen at Museum London, if you have an opportunity to go, it will be fantastic. There's a woman named Amber Lloyd Langston, and she's actually the curator of regional history. She actually contacted a few people like myself, a woman named Iman, Samantha, and also Amanda. Fantastic people. And what we did is she had some artifacts in Museum London that were very difficult to look at. She had some pictures as well that were had some racial overtones to it, discriminatory overtones to it. And we're going to put these on display in Museum London. And students can go into that museum, and also parents and also families can go in there and take a look about how far we have come, but the past of what we've encountered. And in that, there'll be another opportunity and a teaching opportunity for people to be involved in this conversation of culture and also race relations. So this is actually at Museum London. The starting of this is going to be April 6th of this exhibition, and it will go all the way to September 15th. Yes, of 2019. So if you have an opportunity to go and take a pilgrimage down there, I don't think you'll be disappointed when what you see. Now, let's get into this area here. I actually had, in my presentations, I actually have students contact me about culture and race and ethnicity and questions that they may have. You know, interestingly, I had a young man email me just recently or text me, and he said he's been called a terrorist in his school. See, that doesn't build healthy relationships. That separates people. So apparently he went to talk to one of the child's parents because this happened in his high school. And he said that the parent that he communicated with, apparently from the text that I got, apparently did not necessarily care. So that really bothered him. He didn't know what to do in that particular situation. Then I had a student email me, and she said something like this, which means I'm paraphrasing this, which means I'm putting this in my own words, but this is the essence of the question that have come to my knowledge from these students. She said something similar. She said, my parents do not like Jewish people, but I still talk to them. Is that okay? She said her family doesn't like Jewish people, but I still talk to them. Is that okay? And that's almost heartbreaking, where these kind of conversations and questions are coming up. I had another student email me just recently, and he said, Leroy, not to be a bother to you, but he said, I'm a black student, and he underlined the word black. And he told me that when he leaves school, he goes shopping, and he's being followed by people at a particular store. He asked me, is there a law against this? Because it's making him feel very, very uncomfortable. And so I responded back to him to give him some support. Then I had another student email me and said, Leroy, how can you stop believing racist things that my family believes about Germans? And I paused. I had a gap moment, GAP. Just grab a pause and try to respond to some of these questions that these students have that are very important to them. Then I had at a high school, roughly I believe this year or last year, where a student was asked a question. A student was actually making a racist and derogatory comment in the school, and the teacher addressed that. And the student said something to the effect of this: well, it's okay to make racist jokes as long as you have a black friend who doesn't mind. So we talk about positions of power and how that affects relationships and what we have. And so that high school had to address that situation as well. So in that, I want to talk to a little bit about this whole area of racism, because I think culture and racism, they're very separate, but they're very common as far as working together, as far as understanding cultures and communities. It will build healthy relational interactions with one another. But you know, there's actually no such thing as a black race or a white race or Vietnamese race or Chinese race. These are actually called social constructs that were created by mankind, womankind, peoplekind. This was created by people to separate us based on the categories and we see ourselves with. But at the same time, we do see color. Please don't ever say this, and people do this to be polite. I think I'm maybe getting ahead of myself, but it's still okay to discuss this. please don't say to somebody that you are colorblind. We're getting to the definition of racism momentarily, but please don't ever tell people that you're colorblind. Because people have a lot of cultural capital and also racial capital, which means they have access to resources that the general population may not have because of the fact of the way they look in any given society. But don't tell people that you're colorblind. I am a person of color. Quote unquote, I'm a black man, or they call us African American or African Canadian. I use myself as a personal experience because people may ask me the question, why do people of your persuasion, yet there's always an exception to the rule? Why do they say African and hyphenate that word with culture or hyphenate it with your quote unquote race for the sake of discussion? Well, the word African American was coined by a man named Jesse Jackson. And Jesse Jackson has a Parkinson's disease right now and he still lives in America. He was on the scene when Dr. Martin Luther King got assassinated on April 4th, 1968 in front of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee. And he was the first person of color to run to become the president of America. It wasn't Barack Obama, it was actually Jesse Jackson, I believe. And obviously he did not win that particular election, but he laid the groundwork for Barack Obama to come on in. Well, he coined the phrase, and the reason why people of color use that term is because generally speaking, yet there's always an exception to the rule, not all people of color believe this, but people of color generally believe that first person, man and woman, were actually born, life, civilization started in the continent of Africa. So that's called our ancestral lineage. And this is why we use that term to reflect the population of people. And this is why the term is used periodically throughout the course of people's lives. But racism, you know what racism is? I'm going to take a look here. I put my glasses on. I think I heard, oh, okay, somebody else came on. All right, wonderful. Okay. Oh, thank you for your wisdom and continued commitment to educating our community. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. I appreciate that. But racism is actually, and also the other wonderful comments as well, but racism is actually a belief that one race is better or superior to another one. And racism, like culture, is something that's taught to you. See, I'm born my color, but I have to be taught my culture. So even though they work together, they're very independent. But don't tell people, like I said, you're colorblind. Don't tell people you're colorblind in any aspect. I know people do it to be polite, but me being, unless legally you can't see color, I understand that. But don't tell people that you're colorblind because you're dismissing part of my identity or part of another person's identity. See, in life, a lot of people from different walks of life and also relationally, we want reconciliation. But you cannot have reconciliation until you first have recognition. You have to recognize a person exists and who they exist with and who they are before you can reconcile a relationship. So for myself, yes, I'm a person of color. I'm not a colored person. I'm a person of color. That's the correct term. But people of color don't have a problem with recognizing the difference. And generally speaking, even if it's a person with a disability, whatever the case may be, the problem they have is what do you do with actually what you recognize? So recognition is not bad. It's about what you do. Now, if somebody looks at me and says, because I'm this persuasion, I'm going to treat you this way, that becomes problematic. But to recognize the difference, there's no problem in that because we're all different. So you can't divorce myself from my color. If you get Leroy in any environment, you're going to get black. You can't say, Leroy, could you please come to my school or my work environment, but leave your blackness at home? It's like going to a restaurant. You can't go to a restaurant, whatever the restaurant may be, and ask for a glass of water to the waiter or waitress and say, may I have a glass of water, but I do not want the wet. It doesn't make any sense because wet is a characteristic of the water. You get water, you're going to get wet. You get Leroy, you're going to get a black person or African Canadian, however you want to term that, right? So you can't divorce the two. So racism is actually a belief that one race is superior to another. And racism is actually packaged in a number of different ways. It's packaged in media and in schools. Because see, schools are not culturally or racially neutral. They bring that sort of environment, sometimes possibly biases, into the classroom. And not to say that teachers are bad, don't misunderstand me, not saying that at all. But you have students in your schools that have a lived experience that sometimes don't see themselves reflected in the curriculum or even in just basic conversations regarding the topic here that students are being taught in that particular classroom or learning environment. And I think what happens with racism, I think one reason why people don't talk about it is because they may be afraid of saying the wrong thing or being accused of something that they're actually not. So sometimes they hide from the conversation and they don't bring it up because it'll cause problems. And people think if you do talk about racism and culture, it won't go away. You'll cause more racism by talking about racism. I don't really believe that. I think you'll build bridges by talking about it, and people can talk from a lived and also personal experience, because a lot of times people want to be heard and they want to gain trust. You know, trust is very hard to get and it's very easy to break. And now we have a platform. I mean, you don't have to look too far away to see what's going on around the world and how it's impacting our students and our lives, adults, from a local point of view. So it's okay to talk about these things, and it's also okay to bring them up. If people do say the wrong thing or say something incorrectly, we're here to learn, we're here to make adjustments and move, because culture is not static, it changes. You know why? Because you change. What you are today is not what you're going to be 10 years from now, because the books that you read and the people that you actually interact with. So people change. See, what's accepted, my parents are from Jamaica, Kingston, the capital. What was accepted in Jamaica maybe 20, 30 years ago may not be accepted today, because people change and people grow and people learn, which is a wonderful life, wonderful experience that people can have an opportunity to do that. So racism is actually a belief that one race is better than another one. And racism has a road to it, which is called prejudice, which means prejudging somebody. Prejudice has to do with your mind, your cognitive domain. See, a prejudice, a prejudgment starts in the thinking. And also you have what's called, prejudge means you prejudge something or a situation or a person before you get to know them. So pre means before. We also have the word called stereotype. The stereotype is an overgeneralization of a group of people. An example of that is, for example, all people from a particular religious persuasion are terrorists, which is not true. Or all people of color, black, play basketball. Or, for example, all Jewish people, or, for example, all people that are from a particular form of academia are this way. Those are called, we can go on and on, but those are stereotypes that impede and affect our relationships with one another. And then you have what's institutional racism as well. And that's based on policies and procedures that are interacted, that are working on, that limit the full participation of people of color. And so these are the road, this kind of, I look at it as the road to racism. So somebody can actually somebody can have a prejudice, but not necessarily be a racist person. But if you have some of these other two categories with them, stereotyping, prejudice, racial discrimination, all these things will lead you to that particular way. So racism is something that's taught to you. And it baffles my mind on occasion when I go to schools and I hear students talk about words that they say or they hear in the hallway, in the cafeteria, words that they see, for example, on the street, or they hear on the street, or maybe in a theater, wherever it may be. And it's very destructive. There's a man that I know is a very great, is a wonderful, wonderful person. And his name is E.B. Smith. And he's actually on the board of the Grand Theater. And he's doing what's called a performance a few years ago called Mountaintop. And I believe he was, during one of the breaks, he actually took a walk downtown London. And I think there was a two-person play. So the play was basically about the last few hours of the life of Dr. Martin Luther King. And he actually was walking downtown and somebody drove by and said a very derogatory term. He's a person of color, derogatory word to him. And he went on Facebook and he just talked about his experience and how that affected him. I know he came into the city here as to be a part of this wonderful production, and and that kind of left a sour taste in his mouth. And you ask yourself a question: as wonderful as London is, there's still an underbelly and an undercurrent of things that are not productive and that are taking place in our particular city here. And we can do a lot in the city here, very small, simplistic things to address this topic area, so that when people come into an area or they move from one social space to another, they don't feel uncomfortable. They feel safe, they feel secure, and they feel wanted and also included, no matter what they look like or basically what they basically believe. When I was in school, we had nursery rhymes. We had terms for people of color called, not to be disrespectful by any stretch of the imagination, terms like Toby and Jigaboo and Porch Monkey, and people frame that under the auspices of a joke. I'm just joking, Leroy. We're just joking. This is how we're just having a good time. This happened when I was in school. And people of color don't necessarily all the time just stand up and say that's not correct, because we just didn't want to be isolated and outside of that. So we just wanted to be part of the group. So we just kind of let things go sometimes. And we just took on those particular labels that people gave us that were from what's called a power position. And then what happens is we start to call ourselves this on occasion in different forms. Those things are detrimental. Those things hurt, those things hinder, those things affect our relationships and our lives. I actually want to go over and really share a small quote by a man named Muhammad Ali. He said, "Hating people because of their color is wrong. And it doesn't matter which color does the hating, it's just plain wrong." Muhammad Ali, his name was Cassius Clay, then he became a Muslim and he changed his name to Muhammad Ali. And there's a man, his name is Oscar Peterson. He said, "Racism has been to human relationships like cancer has been to human existence. It is a disease that eats away at the very fabric of humanity itself." So racism destroys relationships. Oscar Peterson, as you know, passed away. He was a famous jazz musician in Canada here, did a lot of work in America, traveled along, played the piano extremely well. And he said that, and I can imagine what he went through being a person of color in that particular industry, and how that followed him, and how that affected his relationships with other people. Well, you don't fight racism with racism. You fight racism with what's called solidarity. So what I want to do is kind of talk about keys to building healthy and cultural relationships, because that's somewhat the forum. That's the title of this particular Facebook Live, and how to build that. See, when you build something, you have to have a strong foundation. In order to have the foundation of any home or any building, or even the campus that you're going to, a school, that foundation has to be strong, because things are going to be built upon that. And so some of these small points I'm going to give you, some of these may be repetitious for some of you may know this already, but repetition is the mother of learning, and I think it's important that we hear some of these things so we can make some adjustments if we need to. Not everybody is faultless, but we can make improvements. So I wrote down keys to building healthy cultural and racial relationships. Number one, an awareness that we all have culture. In order to have a healthy relationship with me, and I have to have a healthy relationship with you, you have to understand, you have to come into the relationship, regardless of different ethnicities and racial groups, that you're coming in with something, and you're not coming into the relationship to take something. You have to come in bringing something. And when you come into the relationship with people from different walks of life, you're bringing your culture, you're bringing your language, you're bringing your food, you're bringing your ethnicity, you're bringing yourself into that relationship. And other people are bringing themselves into the relationship. But you're not there to take away from the relationship, because that's when people get depleted. You're bringing something into the conversation. You're bringing something to it, which is fabulous. So an awareness that we all have culture. So even though knowing that you all have culture, no matter what ethnicity you are, you can bring that into a relationship and start as a foundation to understand people that are from different walks of life. So now if you know that you have culture, when you notice that people from Syria coming here, or people from Afghanistan coming to the country, you don't have to look at them very strangely and thinking that they're here in Canada to quote unquote take our jobs away, which is untrue. Or they're here to cause crime, which is untrue. Or they're here to start riots, which is untrue. You know that they're bringing something into this country as part of their culture, so also you are bringing something into this country as well as part of your culture, no matter what you look like physically. So an awareness that we all have culture. Also, to build healthy and cultural relationships, another point I jotted down is appreciate and don't appropriate a person's culture. When you appreciate a culture, you actually, no matter what you're doing, you acknowledge. For example, if you're doing an activity or doing something to kind of celebrate, and this may be in the school, a particular culture. Before you do anything regarding that culture, you go to that community first and get their quote unquote blessing on what you want to do, and they'll tell you what is appropriate and what is not. And then from that, when you do something publicly regarding that culture, you give credit to where that information came from. You know, there's a woman not too long ago. She is a very famous person, and she has a very famous family, and she braided her hair one day. And she's a Caucasian woman, and she said, "Look at my Bo Derek braids." And she had a phone, I think, and she's just photocopying or videotaping herself. And nothing wrong. She's a very wonderful person, I perceive, and also her husband. But she said, look at my Bo Derek braids. And she had her nice sunglasses on and she was kind of posing, taking a photo. And people from racialized communities were kind of concerned from that, because we looked at that and we looked at that as being cultural appropriation. And see, when you look at that and you go, well, what's wrong with that, Leroy? Look at my Bo Derek braids. Well, what happened was Bo Derek was the first woman, Caucasian woman, for people to braid her hair on what's called a movie called 10, I believe. And she's running on the beach and her hair was blowing in the wind and it was braided. And people thought that was just extraordinary. But people of color have been braiding their hair for years. We don't get that kind of notoriety. And so what this person did was she said, look at my Bo Derek braids. Well, those braids did not start with Bo Derek. It started in what's called the continent of Africa. And a lot of times people braided their hair to separate themselves as far as the tribe that they were from. And we didn't get recognition because we've been braided. Now it's fashionable to do so. But we had to do that because of the condition that we were in and to separate ourselves in different parts of different ways. So that's where the braided hair came from. But now it's looked at as something that's very in pop culture and it's very fashionable now, which is great. But people look at that as cultural appropriation, or wearing outfits and not necessarily knowing the history of what you're actually wearing. So in building healthy communities, you want to appreciate a culture, but you don't want to appropriate a culture. And this goes as far as even Halloween. I know people sometimes dress up during Halloween with their favorite icon or person, or quote unquote black face, or any kind of face that does not reflect the nationality that they are from. That's very insulting to the people that you're trying to represent. Don't ever do that. Okay, don't ever do that. There's a student that actually did that at a school that I was at. I was talking to a class and we were talking about this topic area, and he said, Leroy, you know, I went up for Halloween, and he was very honest about that, and I really appreciate that. He had the strength and the courage to share this in front of his class. And he said, when I went for Halloween, and mind you, also with Halloween, not all countries celebrate Halloween. So a lot of people in North America think it's a universal thing. But my parents are from Jamaica. We don't have Halloween in Jamaica. So certain countries don't have it, even though it's even popular here. But this young student went up for Halloween and he dressed up in blackface, I believe. He liked a famous basketball player. And he wanted to recognize that, and he went up for Halloween. And he said, Leroy, when I went up for Halloween, a lot of people gave me dirty looks. And I said, my man, you know why? All right? Because of what you look like. You're trying to look like what you are not. I said, don't ever do that again. And so he understood that. And one student came up to me at another school. He said, Leroy, I like a famous basketball player who's from a particular persuasion. It's okay to dress up as him as Halloween. And I said, yes, you can, but you can wear his jersey. You can have his number. You can have his name on the back of your jersey, but do not touch your skin. Do not touch your face, because that can be very insulting to the people that you're trying to represent. So for myself, I'm a person of color. I'm a black person. I'm not going to dress up from somebody from maybe Southeast Asian community or another. That's not for me to do. All right, that's not me, and that's not who I represent. I represent myself. I may like Yao Ming, that plays basketball, who played in the NBA, who now is retired, and I think he lives in China. I can wear his uniform. I can respect what he did, but I don't need to touch my face to try to imitate what he looks like. No need for me to do that, and that's very insulting to the people that you're trying to represent. Another point I want to share with you is for teachers that are in schools, that are teaching classes, if you can resist the temptation from streaming racialized students to certain courses and also professions. You know, for example, a student may be from a particular persuasion, and you may think, well, he's good in math. I'm going to just kind of, and sometimes it's unintentional. You just think, you know what, you're going to be very good in math. Let me just kind of stream you into these courses. But maybe he wants to play, or she wants to play basketball, right? So you can't look at somebody and just assume, based on what they look like, that this is how they're going to perform, or this is what they should be good at. Well, you're a person from this particular racialized community. You're very good with your hands. You should not go into academics. You're not that strong academically. Maybe you should go to a community college. Nothing wrong with college, but maybe that person wants to go to university. And maybe they can do the work, but they have not given the opportunity to do such things. And then when they reach grade 11 and grade 12, and they want to go to what's called university, they don't have the credits, or they don't have the courses to achieve that, because they've been streamed throughout the course of their life in certain professions. I think everybody getting a free opportunity, getting an opportunity to succeed in life, they have to start on the same line. And I think it's very important with a teacher. Just be aware of students in your classroom, but also not to stream students because of what you may believe they should be good at or they should be involved in. And also honesty. Honesty is very critical. You notice a lot of people that experience racism or cultural misunderstandings, many times they go to their own communities for safety. And one reason why that is because when we tell our community that this has happened to us, we don't have to explain it away. When I tell somebody that this has happened to me, and they may be from the same racialized or maybe a different racialized community, they understand because there's this unwritten understanding that I understand where you're coming from. And we don't have to defend it like maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they didn't mean that, Leroy. Maybe they didn't mean that. Maybe they're just having a bad day. Well, you know what? I went to a school just recently in London, Ontario. I'll not tell you the school, nor will I tell you the board that the school is at, because I do not want to embarrass the school nor the school board. But I was asked to go and do a presentation on Black history. And they asked me to come and do the presentation for the school. It's going to be in the auditorium, and I said, no problem. They said that the students are going to introduce you, so could you please send us maybe with a couple of lines to introduce yourself, so they can introduce you, regarding what you're going to be doing and talking about. So if you can give us a couple of lines about yourself, I said, no problem, I'll do that. I gave that to them. And then long story short, they said that students are going to be a part of the auditorium. They're going to introduce you. There may be dancing, singing, so that it's not all about me as doing a presentation. And I appreciate that. I said, no problem, because it's not about me. It's not all about me. I know that I just do what I can to help out, and then others can just come along and take over. So I said, do you mind if I have a music stand on the stage? Because I don't like a large podium, because I like to move around and walk around when I do my presentations, and the podium is very stationary and it's not very maneuverable. So they said, no problem. So they called me up on the stage, and all the students are there from grade 9 to 12. It's only one auditorium because the school is not that large. So I go in there, I start my presentation, and they close the door, and yet the door is not soundproof, so you can still hear what's going on outside of the door. So as I was doing my presentation, a student in that school, now mind you, this student had some challenges, understandably so. Some people, a couple teachers and staff had to work with the student, understandably so. But that student yelled out in the hallway while I was on stage doing my presentation. They said that, I don't want to listen to this N-word. They call me the N-word. I will not say that publicly just because of Facebook Live, but they said, I don't want to listen to that N-word. So I paused momentarily, and the audience heard what happened. And the audience, they almost took their breath away. And they're watching to see how I was going to respond to that. So I stopped, and I paused momentarily, and I said, you know what? I said to myself, I said, it's not important what people call me. It's only important what I answer to. See, nobody in life can make you feel inferior without your permission. So I finished the presentation. After the presentation was done, the assembly was done, walked off the stage, the vice principal said, you know what, Leroy, I just want to say I'm sorry, I apologize. I said, you know what, these things do happen. These things do happen. So I left, and I went back to work and carried on with my day. And then the student from that school emailed me about the situation. Then he called me at home. Now, I do not know how he got my home phone number. My wife apparently got the message, and she said, Leroy, somebody left a message from you, a student from the school. So me, myself and my beloved wife walked upstairs, and we pushed a play button on the machine. And just to paraphrase the message, which means putting this in my own words, this is the essence of what this particular student said. He said, Leroy, I'm in grade 12, and I'm sorry. He said, all of us at our school does not believe what this one student said about you. And I do not want this to ever hinder you from coming back to my school. He said, I'm in grade 12, and I'm going to graduate this year. And if you do decide to come back next year, I'll probably be graduated. But if you let me know, I'll actually take the day off and come back and hear what you have to say. So I called that young man back, and I just said, you know what, thank you. I said, thank you, because I didn't give my home phone number. But he must have searched online to get my home number to call me to see if he was okay. I said, thank you, see if I was okay. I said, thank you so much for asking to see if I was okay. And he's a Caucasian student. He's not my persuasion. But because he wanted a relationship with me, he wanted to make sure I was okay. And I didn't have to explain anything away to him. I said, you know, I'm doing all right. I said, if your school wants me to come back, I'll be more than happy to come back and do a presentation in your school. I told him I do not have any hatred in my heart. And as I'm doing this Facebook Live right now, if this young woman were to walk into this office while I'm talking to you, I'd pause momentarily, walk over to her and give her a hug and ask her how she's doing. I don't hate her. I don't like what she did, but that's just symptomatic of what's going on generally and around the world. And people can change. And I thoroughly believe that people can change. And I think if we have healthy relationships, make relationships long term with different ethnicities and cultures and races, and we can talk about these issues in relationships. I can talk to a person that's not my persuasion about this without feeling that I'm going to offend them, or they may be offended by the conversation. When people of color can feel comfortable talking about the situation with people that do not look like them, no matter what the persuasion is, I think we're going to move forward into having what's called healthy relationships, because then we can be honest about what is going on, and then we don't have to make excuses about this person that did this to this particular person. But we can say, you know what, we can listen and be an ally. And the person that is an ally is not just going up and standing, but also just listening to the lived experience. Listening, because many times we have never had this conversation. We've had this with our own communities many times. We want to get it out there so people understand that this is how we have to live, and this is how society views me as a person of color. And this is some of the things that I interact with and I interface with sometimes on a regular basis throughout the course of a year. And for you to hear and understand this, and then I can understand and hear your story, we can, number one, have compassion for each other. We can have understanding for each other. And we can have a healthy relationship, whether it's young people or adults, towards one another. So folks, these are some of the things I just want to share with you, and hopefully they've can help you in various kind of capacities. And I'm just going to get myself a drink of water. Excuse me momentarily. Outstanding. But you do have our email address. I want to leave you with this, though. A couple of resources and websites that you can actually access if you want to. There's one is called LUSOcenter.org. That is actually our website. Our organization is called LUSO Community Services, but our website is www.lusocentre.org. We also have Facebook. You can access us through Facebook, and our Facebook address is at LUSO Community Services, and it's at the @ symbol, LUSO Community Services, all one word. So at LUSOCOMMUNITYSERVICES. Then also there's another website that may be of interest to you called www.mediasmarts.ca. That's www.mediasmarts.ca. I believe they're still in existence. If not, forgive me for giving you that if it's incorrect. Another website is called standagainstracism.org. So www.standagainstracism.org. And there's another website called www.tolerance.org. Now the website has some very interesting things. Me personally, not to criticize the website or the people that are working there, because I know they're doing some fantastic work. But for me, tolerance, the word tolerance as an individual, I don't believe that you should tolerate people. You tolerate a bad hair day. Now, if I had hair, you just tolerate it. You had a bad hair day. I don't think you should tolerate people. I think you should actually understand people. So when you tolerate somebody, it means you just put up with them. Okay, I'm just going to put up with you because you're in my space. But when you understand people, you understand where they're coming from and having compassion to some of the concerns that they're dealing with. So, but not to take away from the organization itself, called tolerance.org, but that's their website. Also, another site is called blackhistorycanada.ca. So www.blackhistorycanada.ca. And also one more I'll give you, and it's called museumlondon.ca. Now, if you're a staff member or you're a student and you're interested also in Black history, Museum London and myself and some other organizations actually came up with a grade 7 and 8 social studies curriculum that's smart board compatible, that students and teachers can access to get resources on Black history in Southwestern Ontario from roughly 1830 to 1920. So if you go on Museum London's website and you go on one of the address bar there, there's an area called school programs. You click on that, then you click on teacher resources, then you scroll to the bottom, and you'll be able to download on your computer resources that are PowerPoint compatible, I believe, Smartboard compatible, that gives you resources and information as a teacher's guide as well to provide resources to you to talk about this topic area of Black history. And Steve Mavers, he's a curator, I believe, of education. He actually works at Museum London, and he's a fantastic resource. His name is Steve Mavers at Museum London as well. He's a fantastic resource. So folks, it has been a pleasure having this time with you. This is all new for me. I can't see y'all. I can see some of the things that you're writing. I can't see y'all, but put on my fancy glasses. But I thank you so much for the opportunity and the time that you allow me to spend with you. Well, until we meet again, I hope you all have a great day. I hope you all have a great week. I hope you all have a great month, and I hope you all have a great life. Thank you so much for taking the time. And until we meet again, enjoy your day.
It's just the bottom right.
Oh.
There's a red button.
Is it still on? Oops, I'm still on. I'm sorry about that. Let me just click this off again.
Oh, one more time. And then I think it should say.
End here.
Yeah.